Hello, my name is Brandy Martinez, and this is my video for Module 1, Inclusive School Culture. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little bit about me and my personal life. So I have all of these different pictures that coincide with those bulleted points. The first one is of my husband and I. We've been married for 4 years. We are in that picture in one of our most favorite places in the world, which is Isla Mujeres. It's a little island off of Cancun. We love going there, and we've been going there. We got engaged there, and we've tried to go every year since. Right next to that is my daughter. So I'm raising two beautiful babies. My daughter is 3 years old, and then my son just turned 1. So for a while there, I was raising two under two. It was a good time. It's a little bit busy though. So it still is really busy. It's still so fun, but they are the absolute light of my life. I could not be more prouder or more happier to do anything than be their mom. So love them so much. Over in the left-hand corner is my cat. His name is Leo. He is big, he is fat, and he is amazing. He's actually sitting right next to me. He's the best. In the middle there, I have a picture of some weights because I enjoy going to the gym. That's my me time. That's my time to kind of be myself, where I don't have to necessarily be a teacher or be a mom or be a wife. It just gets to be me, Brandy. So I really, really enjoy that. And then the final one there is that I'm from Dodge City, Kansas. So, you always hear that saying, get the heck out of Dodge. Well, I'm still there. I've lived here my whole life. I did move a little bit away whenever I went to college, but then I came back because I really felt like I needed to pour into the community that raised me. So I love living here. It does get a little bit boring at times, but it's a great place. Okay, so a little bit about me professionally. So I'm entering my 7th year of teaching. I received my bachelor's in education from Wichita State here in Kansas, and then I received my master's in English to speakers of other languages from Fort Hays State University. I taught first grade as a student teacher, and then I moved up to 5th grade where I taught for 2 years, and then I moved up to 6th grade where I have been teaching for 4 years. Our elementary schools are actually K through 5, and our middle school is a 6th through 8th grade. So I am part of the middle school, which is an interesting time. I always thought I was going to be with the littles, and that's really where my heart was always at. I always wanted to teach 2nd grade, but once I went up, it was just I fell in love with it. So I really, really enjoy what I do. I teach the Connect class, and anytime I say that, people are confused because they don't understand what that is. But Connect is basically a computer applications class. So I teach about digital citizenship, I teach basic computer skills, I teach a lot of typing, and this is the first time that students really get some time to type, like dedicated time on the computer. Before this, they don't have a class where they are just learning about computer technology. So I enjoy my class. I'm also part of the building leadership team, the 21st Century Skills PLC leader. I've been a mentor teacher, which I really enjoyed doing that this past year. And then I'm also a part of the multiplier team, which is really a team that is comprised of a lot of different educators in our district who are focusing on culturally responsive teaching. So some things that we talked about in this presentation, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in because there's a lot of things to talk about. I feel like I summarized a little bit too much possibly, but I don't really just want to read everything on there because I know that you can read. So I'm just gonna try to go through this not too quickly. So the first article, 7 Ways to Create an Inclusive Classroom Environment. Very interesting, and made me think about the things that I'm actually doing in my classroom, things that I am continuing to do, things that I should be doing. But I did think it was interesting how this article talked about how higher education has really diversified their school environment, but K through 12 schools have not. I think that's interesting, and I'm not quite sure why that is happening. I feel like it would make more sense for K through 12 to do that because we truthfully see so many diverse students. Higher education, it comes at a cost, so it just feels like it would make more sense for K through 12 to be paving that. But either way, creating inclusive classrooms is important, and then those are some of the 7 ways that we can do that. So providing academic support services, making sure that there are people in the classroom that can help students, preparing teachers to educate students about privilege and oppression. So these are really topics that are really important, and whenever we are teaching about those topics, teachers have to be able to do that without any bias. And I feel like that's probably the most important part about this, making sure that teachers are removing their own biases and being able to teach about these topics that are very important. Addressing those concepts, global power structures, racism in our curriculum, and making sure once again that we are moving our biases away, adjusting the ranking calculations to take diversity and cultural background into account. So a lot of our state testing, it's not taking that rich cultural background that our students have into account. So students then don't do maybe as well as they could. We also need to foster an inclusive larger school community, so making sure that all stakeholders are on the same page of inclusivity and create a space for discussion that promotes inclusivity. So making sure that we are talking to our parents, talking to all stakeholders, talking to families, anyone in the community about inclusivity and its importance. So this next article, Inclusive Leadership in Education, also very important, and this was the first article that talked about being an inclusive leader. So I like how this said that it goes beyond special education, because a lot of the time it seems like we just think of inclusivity and thinking about children with disabilities, but this is more than that. This is talking about race, social class, ethnicity, geographic location, religion, and gender. So inclusivity is making sure that we are appreciating all of the diversity, and inclusive leadership is appreciating the diversity not only in our students but also our staff. So it's also welcoming everyone's individual contributions. So the aim of inclusive leadership is to create change and innovate while balancing everyone's needs. So this is difficult sometimes because not everyone has the same thought process, not everyone has the same point of view. We all have different backgrounds. Just like we think about that with our students, the same is to be said for staff. So it's really important that as an inclusive leader, you are making sure that you admit to your mistakes, that you're aware of your own biases, that you demonstrate an open mindset, display cultural sensitivity and awareness, and focus on collaboration. So next, 10 reasons for inclusive schools. So this was the first article that gave all the reasonings to why inclusive schools are important. So first and foremost, they're a valuable asset for both children and society. So when children are provided, or students, children are provided with inclusive environments, they're able to really understand and appreciate and respect differences in other people. Because if you think about it, our world is full of very different people. If you're never exposed to people who are different than you, then how are you really going to be able to interact with them? So very important. It also allows for those students who maybe don't have the same learning opportunities, it allows them to reach higher than they ever could. What is inclusive education and how can you implement it? So this article defined inclusive education as a teaching model where all students, regardless of their ability, learn together in one environment. So aiming to celebrate student diversity and uniqueness, making sure that students are not being discriminated against for disability, race, gender, economic status. So once again, this article is just talking about the reasons why it's important to have inclusive education. Some things that you can do to implement are to provide cooperative learning structures in the classroom where students are learning in groups from one another, and then making sure that teachers and aides have specialized training and are equipped with necessary tools to support students with disabilities. The training of not only teachers but support staff is also extremely vital in order for success for all students. What are the roles of principals in successful inclusive schools? So this also talks about what principals should be doing. So I thought that one of the a really important statement made by this article was that the principal's active participation is the single most important predictor of success in implementing change, improving services, or setting a new course. So really, you are the person who is leading everyone, and the way that you feel, your behavior, your attitude, your beliefs, they're going to trickle down to the staff. So it's important that a principal states their support for inclusivity clearly to all school faculty and staff. I really enjoyed that this also said that it's important for this to be a formal presentation rather than an informal one, so that all staff really understands how important this is. Um, all students receiving special education services should be participating in on grade level curriculum, and special education teachers should be receiving professional development over that curriculum. Also important, that is by law, students need to be receiving their general education curriculum. And then principals are in charge of monitoring that, so making sure that students are receiving what they deserve to receive. And they should also be monitoring the social aspect of inclusion, making sure to create opportunities for all students to develop friendships and their sense of belonging. So making sure that all students are included. So the inclusive school, so in this article, it talked about how inclusion in schools means that students are given the opportunity to learn with their peers in general education classrooms instead of being separated into another program or classroom. Inclusive schools ensure that no one's left out. Universal inclusivity creates a culture where everyone has access to the same opportunities. They feel respected, valued, and encouraged to pursue those opportunities. Challenges for inclusion exist, but schools aiming to be more inclusive should prioritize listening to students, parents, and staff. This can be done through focus groups or town hall meetings. And inclusion should not just be limited to what happens in the classroom. It should also extend to extracurricular activities. So this is something that I feel like is important, thinking about how can we extend this to not just the academic setting? Where can this be in our extracurricular activities? Next, developing an inclusive classroom culture. So an inclusive classroom culture values and recognizes the contributions of all students, their families, and communities. So really thinking about who a student is and what they bring to the classroom is an extremely vital part of creating an inclusive classroom culture. Because when you think about who they are, then you're able to engage them and possibly connect to their learning in different ways. Making sure that you're establishing a respectful classroom climate also allows for students to know that they're valued and safe, and that there are expectations of them and how they will interact with others, and really with their peers, so that everyone is able to participate. Next, building an inclusive school culture with equity of access to knowledge. So this was a YouTube video that was provided. In the YouTube video, they talked about having courageous conversations with students to really think about how they see themselves and where they see themselves in the world. It's important to understand a student's background, to understand how they're going to learn, and making sure that we're raising our expectations so that students can rise to the occasion, and fulfill their full potential. So teachers must also collaborate with one another to find solutions that help students, using their rich culture to support academic success. And all teachers must buy into the idea that all students can learn in order for them to learn. I feel like that is such an important statement, and one that teachers need to be reminded of. We have to believe that all students can learn, and that's an extremely important part of an inclusive school. So the value of inclusive education. So inclusive education involves diverse students learning together in the same classroom and feeling safe and a sense of belonging in that shared space. So this type of model provides a better quality of education for all children and is a powerful tool to fight against discriminatory attitudes. Schools that provide children with tier first opportunity to interact with the world beyond their family. So schools are the first to provide children with with an opportunity to act with the world beyond their family. So it's imperative that schools are doing everything possible to make students feel included. That's a really important part of this article and something that we need to think about. So this is the first time students are interacting with anyone else, and we should be the model of what it needs to look like. Next, creating inclusive schools for all students. So this article was really interesting. It talked about how Falk Elementary School in Madison, Wisconsin really took a direct approach to inclusive education. So they really went all or nothing. They decided to have no self-contained special education classrooms, no resource room pull-up programs, and no kids were sent to any other school. So the result of their commitment was an increase in student achievement. They saw an increase in all subgroups, which is just powerful. Knowing those results happened is just absolutely powerful. So I feel like this is something that I would love to see happen, see how it could happen in my school, but I don't know. I don't know if we're there yet, but I would love to see that happen. So tips on creating an inclusive school and why it matters. So this resource gave a bunch of different things that you should be doing in your classroom and what school leaders can look for and what teachers can look for. Some of the things that stood out to me are that we make sure we use inclusive language. So this is something that I know our district has just had a professional development over. And I remember whenever we were in that specific professional development, some teachers were kind of like giving it a little bit of flack, like they weren't really understanding or they were trying to make it something different. So I think it's really important that we think about our biases because that they really guide everything that we do. And sometimes we have to take some time to really think, am I being inclusive? Am I being discriminatory? Who could I possibly be discriminatory against? Even if I'm not trying to do that, I'm not going out of my way. How is that happening possibly? So how did these resources define inclusive school culture, education, and leadership? So they defined inclusive school culture in a few different ways, but really it was all about recognizing the contribution of all students, their families, and the communities, and then making sure that students are valued for their unique abilities and included as essential members of a school community. Inclusive education was described or defined as celebrating student diversity and uniqueness. It also led to better academic outcomes and interpersonal relations for students. And it involves diverse students learning together in the same classroom and feeling safe and a sense of belonging in that same classroom. Inclusive leadership appreciates diversity, invites and welcomes everyone's individual contributions, and it aims to create, change, and innovate while balancing everyone's needs. The principal's active participation is the single most important predictor of success. Once again, I said earlier that that's really important because the principal is the leader of that building, and whatever they feel is going to trickle down to everyone else. What support can a school leader provide to encourage advocacy? So school leaders must wholeheartedly believe in inclusion in order for them to be successful advocates for not only children, but for students, but teachers as well. And in order to encourage advocacy, school leaders must be able to admit to their mistakes and be aware of their own biases. So focusing on collaboration among all stakeholders is also something effective school leaders can do. And not only saying that teachers and aides and parents are collaborating, but assigning dedicated time for collaboration is vital. What plans and strategies can be implemented to ensure the equitable treatment of students and or staff in an inclusive culture? So in order to ensure equitable treatment in an inclusive culture, there must be a clear vision and commitment to implementing an inclusive culture. So everyone needs to understand what the plan is. Everyone needs to know what the vision is. And all staff should be engaging in honest conversations about current inclusion practices. So taking some time to reflect, taking some time to honestly reflect. Leaders should provide explicit training, so having teachers trained, having teachers have that explicit time to reflect is also important. And then school and school leaders should also model expected behaviors. So practice what you're preaching, walking your talk. What steps can a school leader take to change negative assumptions that affect teaching and learning in an inclusive culture? So, like I talked about, what one of the resources said, that they need to support, or school leaders should state their support for inclusivity clearly to all school faculty through a formal presentation. And then special education staff should be assigned to grade levels or department teams so that everyone can collaborate. And they must also practice what they preach once again. And when a problem arises, school leaders must be prepared to solve that problem and take all points of view into consideration. So some concluding thoughts. So I believe this submission demonstrates my knowledge and skills in promoting the success and well-being of all students because I was able to demonstrate my understanding of inclusive education and inclusive leadership in education by reading through these resources. The resources gave me tips and also stated best practices in order to create inclusive learning communities and to display inclusive leadership. So I feel like this assignment is relevant to my learning because as a future building principal, it's imperative for me to understand what I can do to create a culture of inclusivity at my school. I feel this assignment furthered my knowledge about inclusive education and caused me to reflect on my current inclusive practices. I am a part of the multiplier team whose objective is to promote culturally responsive teaching, and I feel that with the help of this team, I'm doing my best to be an inclusive teacher. My principal is great about letting us know when he has made a mistake and addresses situations of exclusivity when they come up. I believe my community still has some work to do in regards to creating more inclusive spaces for all, but as we become more diverse, the inclusivity is going to happen. So we are getting a big factory in town, so we're going to get even more diverse, and because of that, inclusivity is bound to happen. Even if people don't want it to happen, it's going to happen. And then the reflection here. So this assignment really had me think about the way I teach and the way I interact with students. It caused me to confront my biases head on, which is a good thing. I was especially intrigued by the Falk Elementary article where they did not have any sort of separate classroom for students. I would be interested to see if that is something we could make happen at my school and what the effects of that would be. In completing this assignment, I believe it reignited my belief in inclusivity and reassured me of many of the practices I already implement. So all in all, I feel like this was a really great assignment. I was able to dig through a lot of different resources that once again helped me understand what inclusivity means and what it doesn't mean and what I'm doing and maybe what I'm not doing and what I need to do. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation. These